So welcome to the Write Like an Expert series. This is a special Beat the GMAT series where we invite top MBA admissions experts to discuss and break down the application essays for the best U.S. business schools. And joining us today to talk about MIT Sloan is Linda Abraham, who is the founder and president of Accepted.com. So just a couple words about Linda as well as Accepted.com. So Linda is a living legend in the MBA admissions industry. She has been serving as an MBA admissions consultant since 1994, which is when she began her work, and actually Accepted.com was launched in 1996. So right at the crest of the internet's growth and popularity, she had the foresight to understand that many resources that MBA applicants would turn to in the future would be on the web. So Accepted.com, for those of you who aren't familiar, is just an incredible resource. It has blogs, articles, downloadable guides, and many great consulting resources and services available there. So urge you to go to Accepted.com after this event. Linda, some more about Linda. She's actually also the co-founder of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, which is the primary trade organization for MBA admissions consultants, of which I'm a member, as well as Beat the GMAT. It's fantastic. And she has just had a career in helping thousands of people. And it's just an honor to have you today, Linda, to speak with us about MIT Sloan.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to be back in just a couple seconds. Stay with us. I'm going to work with Linda and switch to presentation mode, and we will kick off the MIT Sloan session in just about 10 seconds. So stay with us. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey folks, thanks for waiting. And we are here with Linda Abraham, the founder of Accepted.com. And she's going to be speaking she's going to be breaking down and analyzing the MBA admissions essays for MIT Sloan. And Linda, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for having the Write Like an Expert series, and specifically for inviting me and Accepted.com to present on MIT Sloan's essay topics and application. Before we take a look at the specific questions and the specific essays, I want to take a step back and just think about the purpose of the application process and the purpose of your essays and what you're presenting in your application. The application is a chance for you to show a pattern in your life that matches the values of MIT Sloan or of any other school you're applying to, but the focus here today is obviously MIT Sloan. You need to look for patterns, connections, common threads in your life that match the values and the common threads in the culture and the Weltanschauung that MIT Sloan presents. When those two come together in your application, you're making an excellent case for admission to MIT Sloan. Now, so there's two aspects to what I'm talking about. There's you, which you're going to present in your essays, and there's MIT Sloan. Let's first take a look at some of the important values of MIT Sloan. MIT Sloan, of course, is part of MIT. And MIT, the university, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, its motto is Mens e Manus. I apologize for mispronouncing the Latin. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I know what it means. It means mind and hand. The linking of mind and hand, or the linking of conception and execution, is the heart, it's the guts of innovation. And indeed, I think that is one aspect of MIT Sloan's culture that is very profoundly ingrained. There's a lot of focus right now on innovation in the B-school world. I think it's really part of MIT and MIT Sloan's DNA. It's not just a buzzword, it's not just the latest fad. It's just a part of the heart and soul of that particular school, and it's presented in this very simple and motto that goes back to the founding of the school over 100 years ago. Another important aspect of MIT Sloan that I think is somewhat underappreciated is its focus on global leadership. It has incredible study abroad, international study opportunities, And there's a real leadership development focus, and leadership focus at MIT, to the extent that when I recently interviewed Rod Garcia, director of admissions at MIT Sloan, and I asked him, what is one aspect of the program that you feel is really not very well known or not well appreciated? And he said it's a leadership development program, particularly the work in distributed leadership that's being done at MIT Sloan. So, again, international, global leadership is something that's very much very important to MIT Sloan, and it's valued there, and it's something that you, if you have it, you're going to want to bring out in your application. Collaborative environment. Again, I think this is very much part of MIT Sloan's culture. It's come through over the years in the course of my work with applicants that this is a culture that prides itself on working together with other students, with other aspects of the school, and with other schools. It's something that should come through in your applications. And closely related to the mind and hand motto, the mens e manus motto, is learning by doing. Strong emphasis on experiential learning that goes back a long time prior to the recent MBA buzz on experiential learning. MIT Sloan was a pioneer in venture capital contests. It was a pioneer in the global entrepreneurship lab. It has a lot of different labs: the global entrepreneurship lab, sustainability lab. It has an entrepreneurship and innovation track, which is one of its most popular programs. And so while there's a strong emphasis on experiential learning, MIT Sloan is not married to any one pedagogical approach. And this was a point very strongly made by Dean Schmidtlein when he addressed the AGAC conference back in June, which I attended. He made it very clear that they're not married to lecture, they're not married to the case method, like the competition up the river, or to project work. They want to teach with the method that they feel will best convey the material being taught. So that's one aspect of the match you're going to try and make in your application. The other aspect, obviously, is you. What do you have in your background that presents the qualities MIT most values? I'm not talking about making up something, and I'm certainly not talking about pretending to be something you're not. I'm talking about looking at the myriad, the infinite things that make you up, both in terms of your attributes and in terms of your experiences, and choosing the ones that best demonstrate your fit with MIT Sloan. So let's first look at the application components. Of the 6 listed on the slide, the transcript, the test scores are already set, presumably already set. You might be retaking the GMAT, but that's a separate issue. And we're not going to discuss that here and now, at least not until we get to Q&A. You might ask me some questions about it then. Application fee, well, that's a matter of your plastic or your checkbook. Letters of recommendation, again, we could discuss that during the Q&A, but that's not really the focus. I'm going to focus on the first 3 elements on that list: the resume, the cover letter, and the essays. Before, however, you start writing anything, what I suggest you do is take an inventory of your experiences and decide which ones best present you and present what you want MIT Sloan to know about your background. Obviously, those experiences you choose should be the ones that match the values of MIT Sloan, some of the attributes and values that I mentioned in the previous slide. But you don't want to constantly be repeating the same thing, and I'm not saying that every essay or every response or the cover letter has to encapsulate everything. I do feel, though, that each element should present something that complements the other elements in the application. Each essay should have a theme and a point. It should complement the other items listed here, and they should complement each other. And there's a number of metaphors you can use, whichever one you like, whichever floats your boat. It can be a mosaic in which each is a stone, a different colored stone that comes to present a particular picture. It can be a jigsaw puzzle. Again, you're putting together a picture of you with the different pieces that all look different. It can be a symphony where each instrument plays something different, but they come together to create beautiful music. That is the quality of an application that you want to present. And you want it to be a winner, you want it to be a classic, and you want it to present you at your best. So let's start going through the different elements of the application. The first one is the resume. The instructions read, please prepare a business resume that includes your employment history in reverse chronological order with titles, dates, and whether you worked part-time or full-time. Your educational record should also be in reverse chronological order and should indicate dates of attendance and degrees earned. Other information appropriate to a business resume is welcomed and encouraged. The resume should not be more than 1 page in length, up to 50 lines. So no 6-point font, please. They mean it. Follow the instructions. They're not providing them for their health. Do stick to a 1-page resume. It can be tough, but it can be done. Secondly, focus on achievements, not responsibilities or your job title in your resume. In various interviews, Rod Garcia has emphasized that MIT Sloan wants to see above average progression in your job, not so much how many years you've worked, but that you've accomplished more than the typical person in your position. So if you focus on merely repeating the responsibilities you have, you will sound like you do what people typically do in your position. If you focus on your achievements, where you've shown, where you've really moved ahead of the game, then you'll be showing that above-average progression and allowing your resume to introduce you. And remember, a lot of admissions readers start with the resume. Allow that first impression of you to come across as, wow, this is a person of impact, this is a person of substance, this is a person of accomplishment and potentially a future global business leader. A few years ago, I met with a client, a very talented young man, a consultant for one of those consulting firms that many of you would give your ITs to join. And he'd been rejected at the schools he applied to, and he asked me to review his application. And his resume basically just described it was a wasted opportunity. He was a consultant, and his bullet points on the resume said, consulted on project X, consulted on project Y. It was such a wasted opportunity. I was saddened when I saw that thing. What would be useful bullet points? An informative bullet point with impact would be one along the lines of, quote, led a 6-member team working on a biotech outsourcing project to Slovakia with a budget of X dollars, came in on time and under budget. Now, admittedly, that's longer than consulted on whatever, and it might be one of 2 bullet points as opposed to 5 bullet points, which basically say nothing. But that bullet point is an informative bullet point. It shows you had leadership. It shows leadership. It shows you on the global stage. And it shows you probably with above average, I don't remember what, I made that bullet point up. It could show you achieving responsibility beyond what is typical. So again, focus on achievements, not responsibilities. Now, the next element, and this is unique to MIT, is the cover letter. Prepare a cover letter up to 500 words stating a place in the MIT Sloan MBA program. Describe your accomplishments and include an example of how you had an impact on a group or organization. Your letter should conform to standard business correspondence and be addressed to Mr. Rod Garcia, Director of MBA Admissions. This is your opportunity to market your qualifications for Sloan. Above all else, this cover letter, like all cover letters, is a sales document, a marketing document. It's your opportunity to show, to make your case for admission, to show your qualifications, and why you belong at Sloan. What are you going to contribute to Sloan? At only 500 words, you have a room for a maximum of 3 achievements. You can go with 1 or 2. That's fine. It really depends on what they were. Qualities, it's not something I can. That's where individual consulting comes in, not a group presentation. But whatever it is, with 500 words, you really cannot go beyond 3 achievements. And what should you be saying? Well, what kind of achievement or accomplishment would count? Did you allow your organization to grow, to save money, to sell more, to reduce expenses, to enter new markets, to develop new products, services, programs? Remember to include the impact of what you did, and because that is specifically what MIT Sloan is asking for. MIT Sloan, throughout its application, is very specific in what it wants. And I would strongly, strongly encourage you. In fact, my biggest recommendation would be to follow the instructions they provide. The second thing I want to make here is that you need to write your letter in using a professional format with appropriate punctuation, salutation, and close. I want to quote from this recent interview that I mentioned with Rod Garcia. By the way, you can read that interview on our MIT Zone page at accepted.com. I'll provide the URL for that later, but you can just Google MIT Sloan Zone, accepted.com, and you get to it. In any case, what did Rod Garcia have to say about the letter? I asked him in the interview, what is a real turnoff in an application or an applicant behavior? And one of the things he said was turnoff. You can read the others online. Also, a lot of people don't know how to write letters. This is the quote. Also, a lot of people don't know how to write letters. No date, no address, no closing. They don't know how to use a professional format. Career development folks say such details still count. Well, they clearly still count with Rod Garcia, and I would suggest that using Mr. Google, you find out what a professional format is for a letter if you're not sure, and you make sure that your cover letter is in that format. Now let's go on to the essays. The general instructions for MIT Sloan's essays are, we are interested in learning more about you and how you work, think, and act. For each essay, please provide a brief overview of the situation, followed by a detailed description of your response. Please limit the experiences you discuss to those which have occurred in the past 3 years. In each of the essays, please describe in detail what you thought, felt, said, and did. Now let's look at these instructions for a moment. The questions and these instructions, certainly, frequently mirror a school's values, and MIT Sloan's are a classic example of that. There's a strong experiential focus on the school's values here, and MIT Sloan's approach is very much reflected in these instructions. It's please describe a time that's one time in the last 3 years. Make sure it's in the last 3 years. Since they've had this instruction, I always get a question, but I want to use an experience from 5 years ago. Don't do it. They want something from in the last 3 years, and they want one experience, a time. So stick to that. Since you're going to only be discussing 3 experiences here, look for the standout moments in your life. You don't have room for anything but the standouts. Now let's go on to Essay 1. Please describe a time when you went beyond what was defined, expected, established, or popular. This essay gets to the heart of innovation and that core value of MIT's and consequently MIT Sloan. The heart of innovation is the ability to go beyond what currently exists or what is currently expected. So how could you approach this question? You could approach it with a scene, an aha moment perhaps, when you suddenly had an idea and you decided to execute on it. It could be in a professional capacity. It could be in a community service capacity. It could be a personal hobby, in any variety of settings. But and it doesn't have to start like that, by the way, but that could be one way. You have an aha moment, or you're faced with a problem, is another way to start. And then what did you think, feel, say, and do? And I would also add, what was the impact of your actions? Okay, it's one way to approach this question. Essay 2. Please describe a time when you convinced an individual or group to accept one of your ideas. This question gets to leadership. It's a leadership question. What evidence of leadership can you show? And again, it can be on the job. It can be in a community service capacity. It could go back to college. though I wouldn't do that if it's more than 3 years ago. When did you persuade, motivate, empower, or lead? I'm not talking about an essay where you basically spam your reader by repeating the term leadership over and over again. I'm talking about demonstrated leadership. Tell the story of that event. Either you can start it in many different ways, and we'll get to some writing tips at the end here. But was it a particular challenge to your leadership that you handled? Was it a group you were addressing? Was it when somebody said, job well done, and you go back? Again, the focus should be on your activities, not the situation, but still, you want to start out with your description of the time or the challenge, and then focus on you. And the third question, please describe a time when you took responsibility for achieving an objective. And it's all of them 500 words or fewer, limited to 1 page. This is another aspect of leadership. I call it the buck stop here aspect of leadership. The buck stops here aspect of leadership. It really is responsibility. And it is the opposite of buck passing and subordinates. When do you take responsibilities? What motivates you to take responsibility? And more importantly, what happened once you did take responsibility? Was it for a fundraising event? Was it for a particular project at work? Was it for a political campaign? Again, there can be any number of examples provided, but it's that the buck stops here. I'm going to assume responsibility. I'm going to organize. I'm going to meet the challenge of the moment. An example I could give, I don't want to use client examples because I don't want to breach any client confidentiality, but I can give from my life. In my kids' high school at one point, there was a family struggling. Their youngest child had leukemia, and they wanted to use directed donor blood donations. When people with leukemia need lots and lots of blood donations. And the mother of the child told me that her oldest child was already in high school, and the high school PTA president periodically would call the mother and say, do you need anything? No, I don't need anything. Do you need anything? No, I don't need anything. One day, the mother got this periodic call from the PTA president. She said, you know what? We're really having trouble getting donors, directed donors. Can you organize a drive to get directed donors? And the PTA president said, sure. And she did everything, flyers, organizing the mechanism for testing, everything from A to Z. She took responsibility and ran with it. Now, the situation doesn't have to be that dramatic, but the point is, again, not the buck stops here is the attitude of a leader, and that's the quality that this question is asking for. So we've discussed the specific MIT Zone questions. Again, I'm giving the URL for the MIT Zone at accepted.com. I've also provided a few other resources, just a couple of resources. We have tons of resources at Accepted that can help you specifically with MIT Sloan. They are accessible from the MIT Zone page, and that would include transcripts of previous Q&As and chats with MIT Sloan, the interview I referred to, blog posts that reference MIT Sloan, interview feedback from applicants who interviewed at MIT Sloan, written tips on their application essays, and again, anything that Accepted.com offers that's related specifically to MIT Zone is accessed from the MIT Zone page. In addition, we do have general MBA essay advice, and I've just included a couple there. The 5 fatal flaws to avoid in your essays. This is a free e-course. And Essays That Stick. That's an online webinar. There's also Bold and Brilliant Essays, MBA Essays. That's another recorded webinars with tips on writing your MBA essays. But for now, I want to close with a few tips, and they are gleaned from the Essays That Stick webinar, but that goes into much more detail. I read a book about a year ago called Made to Stick, and I thought it was a fantastic book on writing, and I culled some of the tips from that and applied them to MBA essays. And the authors of that book, the Heath brothers, have a mnemonic, the Success mnemonic, SUCCES, only one S at the end, and they feel that these tips are really go to the heart of remarkable, effective, and memorable communication. And you want your essays to be memorable in a positive way. So let's go through a few of their tips. The first one is simplicity. You want to have a core idea for each of your essays, even the cover letter. That core idea, everything in that document, that essay, has to support your core idea. Otherwise, throw it out. It's extraneous. And keep that core idea simple and consequently memorable. You have an unexpected element to your essay. If you're a quant jock, perhaps start out with a poem that you wrote. If you write poetry or play music or something like that. One of the sample essays on our site discusses. Again, I think it was a financial analyst, and he starts his essay by writing about a time when he was playing with his rock band at an old. At the time the essay was written, it wasn't old; it was in existence. At the Whiskey A Go Go, which was a famous club on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. C, concrete. And MIT Sloan's essays really lend themselves to this because their instructions are so specific. Keep it concrete. Concrete means you include a sensory detail. They ask for what did you say, feel, do, but you can also include a couple of descriptive details that bring it to life. What did you see? What did you hear? Did the person have a twinkle in his eye, or was it a wizened face? A detail like that makes it much more real. Was it hot, cold, whatever? Credible. And that ties in very closely with concreteness. Numbers tend to make things more credible. That's why, to the extent that you can quantify achievements, they become more credible. Obviously, the numbers have to be real, but quantifying makes things more real, as do concrete details. And then you have E for emotional. I was reviewing an essay the other night. Unfortunately, it was about a difficulty in the author's life, and she wrote with tremendous authenticity about this period. You don't have to write about sad times, but if you can include either pain or pleasure, perhaps an exhilaration at a particular moment, it will add to the emotional quality of the story you're telling through your essays. And, of course, MIT Sloan wants to know how you felt. It will make the essays more memorable and real. I'm not saying that you have to be doing belly laughters all the time or sobbing all the time, but there's a wide range of human emotion, and if you occasionally either evoke that emotion or relate that emotion, your essays will be better. And finally, and probably the most important of the tips, last but not least, story. Tell a story. MIT Sloan, again, is very experiential and to its core, in its values, in its approach to education, and in the questions. It's asking for your stories. Human beings like stories. MIT is requesting stories. The Heath brothers say stories are a wonderful means of communications. Use them in your essays, in your interviews, and you'll do much, much better and hopefully get accepted. If you would like one-on-one advice from Accepted, we're more than happy to help you. We've been helping applicants, as Eric said at the beginning, since 1994, get accepted to all the top programs. We can bring a critical eye and enormous professional editing and writing experience to bear on your applications. Seminars and webinars, articles, e-courses, they're all great. Take advantage of them all. But there's nothing like one-on-one advice that's geared specifically to you, to your situation, to the school you're applying to your strengths and weaknesses. That's something you can only get with a consultant. And I'd like to recommend Accepted. As the owner of Accepted, I am very proud of it. But I think our longevity testifies to our excellence. You can also review the qualifications of our staff online. That's at www.accepted.com/aboutus/aboutus.aspx, or just go to the home page and click on About Us. We would be more than happy to help you. And now I'm more than happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much. So we have been listening to Linda Abraham, the founder of Accepted.com, and she has just done an amazing walkthrough of the resume and essay requirements for this year's MIT Sloan application. And what's going to happen next is she's going to stick around for a couple more minutes after that presentation to answer your questions live. So stick around. We'll be back in a few seconds. But think of a question that you might have about the MIT Sloan application, because this is the perfect time to hear it straight from the source. Well, actually, I see that Linda's already switched over. So let us actually get her back into the picture here. And Linda, welcome back. Thank you so much for that great presentation. So I thought what we could do is I want to actually talk about Made to Stick a little bit more, because this is actually one of my favorite books and one of the most influential books I've read in the last year as well.
It's a great book. I love the book.
Fantastic. And actually, while we talk, I'll bring up a screenshot of the book that cover so people can go out there and buy it. I think it's a fantastic resource to have as you guys think about applying. And one of the questions that I had about that was there was actually an interesting case that I encountered with my experiences reviewing a friend's essays, and it wasn't for MIT, but I was actually it was just a story that this person was trying to build, and there was sort of this interesting conflict that occurred where this person was trying to include some of the elements that the Heath brothers are recommending, such as the concrete details and the emotional ties, the story, but it seemed to almost butt heads with answering the question at times and doing it within the allotted sort of word count. So sort of wanted to get a little bit more of your thoughts about how do we sort of negotiate building that kind of stickiness, even though that takes up valuable real estate in your essays?
Well, I would not say that you have to include every single element in an individual essay for just that reason. You probably don't have the room to. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty easy, and also I'm not sure that every single story is going to lend itself to deeply felt emotion, for example. Mm-hmm. I think a core idea is really mandatory, and actually I think it helps when you have a very limited essay real estate to deal with. So that one, I think that's just a mandatory part of writing. But at the same time, I don't think that you're going to have room for unexpected in every single essay, or you're going to have room for an emotional element in every single essay. It's just not going to be there. Mm-hmm. I mean, some stories are ironic, and they probably won't engender a strong emotion, but they'll get the point across, and that still has to be the primary value. Answering the question has to be number one. Right.
So, I mean, it definitely seems to there seems to be an order of logic. Make sure that you answer the question, number one, and then
make sure you answer the question. And I don't mean to interrupt, Eric, but if I go back to the beginning of the presentation, where I said, think about what do you want them to know about you, mm-hmm. and then how you're going to fit those different elements into the different questions and the different vehicles you have for conveying information. That has to be number one. And then, what's the most effective way to present it?
Right.
At that point in time, the Heath brothers' principles, I think, become very, very helpful.
Right. Right. I'm seeing a question coming in that's sort of a follow-up to the success principles that you outlined. And this one actually is with regard to simplicity. I think I sense that there's actually a bit of confusion from the audience about what simplicity is, in the sense that is simplicity a communication, the means of the way that you communicate, I think, the context or the story, or is it simplicity the example itself? For example, taking an action that was very simple to solve a solution. So I see some follow-up there and some clarification that needs to be needed there. So can you talk a little bit more about simplicity, and if you have another example, that'd be fantastic.
Well, I think simplicity means that you have a basic core idea to your essays, okay, to each essay. Mm-hmm. What I don't, and I dealt with this a little bit in a video, a short video I did. You can find it on YouTube, and you can also find it on our site, about personal branding and admissions. I don't mean that every essay has to convey the same idea. To the contrary, I think that each essay has to convey an idea, and that each essay's core idea should complement the other core ideas that you've presented. But I do think it's really important, and it will help you in your writing if you decide this is the theme for this essay. So, for example, if we go back to, let me look at my notes, let me look at the slides even for a second, and we go back to about innovation, okay? Please describe a time when you went beyond what was defined, unexpected, established, or popular. Now, there's Made to Stick, okay? Eric put it up, and it is a wonderful book and very, very readable. And also, again, I recommend if you don't want to read the book and you want kind of the quick and dirty on how to apply it to your essays, then just look at the webinar essays that stick. But getting back to the question about simplicity, I think the best way to think of it is a core idea. What do you want them in one sentence to remember when they finish reading your essay? So if we go to essay 1, please describe a time when you went beyond what was defined, expected, established, or popular. Well, what if you're looking at data? And you look at the data, and it's supposed to mean one thing, and you see an entirely different pattern there that implies, this actually happened to a cousin of mine. He was working for an aircraft company, and he was looking at data, and he was seeing something that implied there's a much better way to send rockets into the atmosphere. He was a young man. He was about, I think he was late 20s, early 30s at the time. And he went to and he started testing this data, testing his theory. And he saved millions of gallons of gas on every satellite launch since the early 80s because he looked at data from a different perspective. And, of course, in general, most scientists make their most significant breakthroughs when they're young because they're more open to look at things from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. But so if he were writing that essay, he could start with staring at the printout, because, yes, at that point in time it was printouts, staring at the printout and saying, something is going on here. And then what did he do? What did he feel? What did he say? And what was the impact of that could be the conclusion. You know, the data is now showing they're saving $1 million on a rocket launch. Mm-hmm. So the core idea is that he looked at this printout and he saw something never seen before by any engineer who looked at the same data. And then he acted on it, and it had a phenomenal impact.
It's quite an example.
But okay, and it wouldn't bring in his educational background. He wouldn't bring in other examples of projects that he'd run. He wouldn't bring in that he's, anything else that didn't relate to that one achievement, that one phenomenal achievement. Is that helping?
I think so, yeah. And, while you're describing this amazing story, it actually brought me back to one thing that I remember reading in the book, which is the whole concept of commander's intent. I love that portion. And, we'll get to these questions, I promise you, audience, but I just need to, I think, raise this one sort of concept that the Heath brothers bring up too. So in Made to Stick, they provided a couple military examples as to how communications can be effectively, dealt with. And there's a notion of commander's intent, which was essentially creating a military directive that is so simple that it guides all the decisions that happen as a consequence at the lower levels. So if you're a general and you say something like, we're going to take that hill this week, on the battlefield, then that is sort of the key core goal in mind that everyone below the general, the colonels, the lieutenants, even the infantrymen, are thinking about as they make their small decisions, their tactical decisions to reach that singular goal. So when I think about communications in essays, I often sort of raise this example of commander's intent as well. As Linda said,
example.
Yeah, as Linda mentioned too several times already, is there has to be a simple core message that you want to provide to admissions, to the admissions committee. And think of it like you're a general, and there's just one goal in mind that you want to pass along. That it's a great. I love that segment of the book. It just really inspires me.
Another example that I heard about it. I was at a speech and it was referenced, and it was also great. It was about the mess hall in a particularly dangerous region of Baghdad. I forget what it was. I forget the name of it, but basically a point of attitude. Again, which I think that was relating more to the idea of emotional concept. But anyway, it's a great book. I'm glad Eric put up the screenshot. If you're at all involved in communications, I recommend it. It's also a very easy and entertaining read.
We're speaking to Linda Abraham, who is an MBA admissions expert with Accepted.com, the founder and president of that organization. And for those of you who are just joining us, she is right now answering your questions about the MIT Sloan application essays. So let's get to a couple of questions here. I see a question from Lavinia on Facebook, and she's asking, what steps should we follow when we first start writing an essay? Is there a recommended way to just begin writing?
That probably is individual, and I'm sure there are many different approaches. The approach I recommend is, again, much like I said at the beginning, go back and decide which experiences you're going to present in the different questions in the application. That's step one. Mm-hmm. And then focus on question, let's for argument's purposes, let's go question by question or cover letter and then the 3 essays. And then decide what's the core idea, the commander's intent, the theme for that specific essay, and then what examples and what points are you going to make? Basically an outline. I personally like to write from an outline. Now, I don't care whether you use Roman numerals or how you structure your outline in terms of what mechanics you use. Some people now like cluster outlines with concentric circles or whiteboarding. The point is that you take a moment to decide what you're going to include in your essay and to structure your essay. And then start writing. I also encourage you to have an engaging opening or lead. That can be, in my book, that is either a gripping description of a scene, a startling statistic or statement. It could be an anecdote, depending upon the length of the essay. It can be so many different. Occasionally, it can be a quote, but quotes tend to be overused. So, again, it would probably be the unexpected element of the essay. So, and then again, an ending can be unexpected, so it can go different ways. But that would be one tip I would make in terms of structuring your essay and an approach to writing it. Did that help? I don't remember the questioner's name. Did that help you? Did it answer your question?
Yeah, Lavinia, just let us know. Shoot a comment, and I'll pass that back to Linda. So while we wait, I'll actually move on to another question. This one is coming in from Twitter from I believe it's JLTin711. Can we use the optional essay to reflect on some personal challenges that one may have overcome? So optional essays, what's appropriate there? Personal challenges?
I think you have to look at the instructions given in the optional essay. Mm-hmm. If the optional essay is wide open, you can certainly use it for challenges to overcome. There are some schools that might ask specifically for you to discuss that, then probably that would be more appropriate. Mm-hmm. If the instructions of the optional essay don't include something like that, or they're limited. Let's say they only want you to discuss a bad, something that they feel doesn't represent you well, for example, a low GPA, low GMAT, gap in employment history. If they're very restrictive in their instructions and they don't cover what you want to write about, then I probably would recommend that you not include that there. Challenges overcome, however, in general, are very much something that schools want to know about. In discussing challenges overcome, just a little PS on that, make sure that you portray yourself as strengthened by the challenge, not as somehow as damaged goods. You want to make it clear that you overcame the challenge, not that the challenge somehow defeated you. So that's just a little bit of a caveat there. And again, there is a blog post on the website, on the exhibit.com website, that relates to hardships. I think it's called Handling Hardships, because I just recommended it to somebody. And you can look at that there, and I went into that a little bit more.
Kamal from Facebook is asking another question about a specific MIT. I think it's question 3. And the question is, does the objective have to be a professional one, or can it be a self-set goal or a personal goal? So actually, it'd be great to remind us what question 3
is. Yeah, I'm looking at the questions. Question 3. Question 3 is, please describe a time when you took responsibility for achieving an objective. And what was the question?
Does the objective have to be a professional one?
No. In general, I would recommend that you have about a 2-to-1 professional to non-professional ratio in your essays overall. That's not cast in concrete. It's not, don't think like if it's, if you're a 3-to-1 or 4, or that it's terrible, because Linda Abraham said that's a guideline, but it does not have to be professional.
That's great. 2-to-1 ratio. That's a nice sort of thing to have in your back pocket to think about. I did
guideline.
as a guideline. Yes, it's not perfect. Right. One question though about the cover letter. So, So you made a very strong point that it has to be structured professionally. Go out to the web if you don't know how to do that, and find an example of a professionally structured cover letter. That's clear to I think the entire audience. But I think one thing that isn't clear is a little bit more nuances around the tone. So let me sort of provide a little bit of example of, I guess, in the West Coast where Linda and I are from, I tend to believe that the organizations, the people, the workplaces tend to be more informal. If I were to write a letter even to the CEO of companies in Silicon Valley, I would never write it as, hi, Ms. Abraham. I'd probably say, or dear Ms. Abraham. I'd probably start the salutation as, hi, Linda. I want to sort of delve into that a little bit, because when I was personally applying to MIT, I actually struggled with this a little bit, because I tend to feel like my personality is very informal and casual, and I was tempted to write, hi, Rod, or dear Rod, but I think I was swayed the other direction of creating the salutation as dear Mr. Garcia. I know this is a very small point, but do you have a perspective on that?
Yes, I think you should err on the side of formality.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I'm definitely a West Coast person. But I think that MIT and Rob Garcia are very clear that this is a professional document, and you're meeting him for the first time. For the first time, would you really say, hey, Rod, in your correspondence?
I might, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I don't think so. Somebody who's clearly, about 20 years older, and to whom you're trying to, would you do that in a cover letter? Really? I don't think so. Once you get to know somebody, by the way, he's very down to earth.
Very nice guy, yes.
But very wonderful guy.
Yeah.
But I think he's right that there's a place to be professional and a little bit more formal. The expectation is clearly laid out there in the instructions, this is supposed to be a professional document.
Mm-hmm.
I think the exact wording, hold on a second, is you should conform to standard business correspondence. And I realize that once people get to know each other in the business world today, it's all first-name basis. And that's fine, and I'm perfectly comfortable with it. Nobody has to call me Mrs. Abraham or Ms. Abraham or whatever you want. But I think if I'm writing somebody for the first time, it's going to be with a formal salutation, and I would say Mr. Garcia.
There you go. So again, we're speaking with Linda Abraham, who is the founder and president of Accepted.com, as well as MBA Admissions Expert. And I think we have time for one or two more questions about MIT. I see a question coming in from Sandeep on Facebook. And this is a pretty common question. It's sort of outside of the scope of the essays, but his question is 4 years of work experience with a 1-year break in the past year due to medical issues okay with Sloan? Any advice for people who had to take some sort of leave in their professional careers and what they can do to approach that gap in their essays or elsewhere in their application?
Okay. There are a variety of reasons that people have gaps on their applications, and all the schools, including MIT Sloan, will consider a few things. One, what is the reason for the gap? And two, what have you done during the gap? And obviously, this goes without saying, what you did before the gap. Very common reasons for gaps are you wanted to travel, you wanted to do something in a non-professional vein, whether it be study or exploration of something or other, or perhaps commitment to a volunteer cause or something like that. That would be a voluntary gap in employment. And again, as long as you weren't sitting on a beach or watching television most of the time, the schools would probably view that favorably, as long as it still ties in with the school's values. If it was involuntary, in other words, it was because of a layoff or because of illness, the schools will certainly, in case of a layoff, again, they'll look at what you did. Did you start your own business? Did you retrain yourself? Did you get involved in community service? How long were you out of work? And then they'll just weigh it up and throw that into the mix. They will not automatically dim you because you were out of work. They also will not automatically dim you because you were sick. So you need to provide the cause for the absence. You need to obviously highlight your achievements prior to that absence, and move forward. I would also again recommend that if you were out for illness, it may have been on some level a very maturing kind of experience, and it's only an educational experience. And you may want to discuss some of the things that you learned about yourself as an individual, or about dealing with hardship, or dealing even with dependence, depending upon how sick you were, during that year, so that you can even portray that year as a year of growth, even if it wasn't in a professional capacity.
I think we have time for just one more question here, and this is coming in from Twitter with regard to question number 3, which is the objectives question. Is a startup considered professional experience? Is that would you treat as a personal startup?
Are you doing it for fun or for money?
Let's assume that this is for money, but it's like a side business. He didn't have much more detail than that. Yeah.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on that? If you have sort of a side business that which is a small business or startup, can you include that as a part of your professional experiences? Yes,
definitely, and you should, because especially if you're working for a large corporate concern, or if you have entrepreneurial ambitions post MBA, then your startup experience will A, complement your big business experience, and B, give added credibility, talking about credibility as part of the success mnemonic, to your goal.
There you go. Include it. So
Yeah.
we have been speaking with Linda Abraham. She is the founder and president of Accepted.com, one of the world's leading MBA admissions consulting firms. And Linda has been kind enough to walk us through this year's MIT Sloan resume, cover letter, and essay requirements, breaking down each. And she just spent the last half hour with us answering your questions. So Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, for arranging the whole series, and for all the work you do for Beat the GMAT.
Thank you. And just in case we weren't able to get to your questions for today, you have a couple of options. So as Linda had shown in her last slide, there are a number of great resources at Accepted.com you should check out. The people at Accepted are very friendly and knowledgeable. Highly encourage you to reach out as well and see whether you can make a connection there. Again, it's just Accepted.com, fantastic URL. Another option that you have is if you want to ask your question to an Accepted expert on Beat the GMAT, Linda's team is very active on the AskAccepted.com forum that exists in the Beat the GMAT forums. So feel free to post your questions there as well, and you'll find a great response from one of Linda's teammates. So thanks again to the Beat the GMAT audience for joining us for today's session. We have one last Write Like an Expert series session happening on Thursday. So hope that you can make that. And thanks so much for joining us, and take care.